supplies and email services to the Trump transition team. Now, the transition claims that instead of obtaining a subpoena and going through the transition to obtain those materials, Mueller's office went around them and straight to the GSA to request them. Now, the transition claims in its letter to lawmakers that instead of asking for its permission, career GSA staff working with Mr. Lowentritt, who is an attorney at GSA, and at the direction of the FBI, immediately produced all the materials requested by the special counsel's office without notifying Trump for America or filtering or redacting privileged material. Now, that's another point of complaint from the attorney, that the special counsel's office did not take the appropriate steps to protect many of these privileged communications that were included in those tens of thousands of emails protected either by presidential privilege or attorney-client privilege. And that is something that they are also pointing out to lawmakers as they ask for something to be done. Eric?
Yeah, but meanwhile, Mueller's team today is firing back. I mean, as we have said, they're defending their action as appropriate.
Yeah, a spokesperson for the special counsel's office told BuzzFeed News that they did nothing wrong here in this situation. And, quote, "When we have obtained emails in the course of our ongoing criminal investigation, we have secured either the account owner's consent or appropriate criminal process." Now, an attorney for the GSA also told BuzzFeed News that the transition team knew from the start that by using government-provided email and cell phones, that it had no expectation of privacy and that all of those communications could be subject to law enforcement requests. Now, a number of Democrats, they are also suggesting that this move by the transition team is simply an attempt to distract from the special counsel's investigation. And Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell tweeted yesterday, "Private documents on a U.S. government public email system? What are they afraid was found? Baloney. This is another attempt to discredit Mueller as his Trump-Russia probe tightens." Now, as for the White House, Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders told us last night that the White House continues to cooperate fully with the special counsel's investigation and that they expect that investigation to wrap up soon. Eric?
All right, Garrett, thanks so much. Arthel?
All right, Eric, for more on this now, we're going to bring in Tom Rogan. He's a commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. Tom, good morning to you. First of all, I would like you to explain to us, break it down. What is it that Special Counsel Mueller's office allegedly did wrong?
Well, the claim is that they didn't go through the proper legal processes in terms of applying for access to these emails. That in a normal situation, one might assume that they would go with a subpoena or with a warrant to the actual server position. In this case, it would be the GSA, or it could be Gmail if it was, a private email system. But instead of doing that, they simply requested the material from the GSA, a lot of material, and in doing so, we're not fulfilling at least the spirit of the law in terms of due process rights.
So they're saying, the Trump transition team, they're saying, listen, you should have notified us that these documents were these emails and other documents were being requested. Perhaps had they done that, then I don't know, would there have been a risk that that information would have been scrubbed? I mean, just really the point is, how strong is the legal argument to support the claim?
I don't think it is very strong, to be honest. I mean, from a legal point of view, actually American government servers, and this is a reality, it's how they catch leakers. It is an expectation that when you go and work for the federal government, what you are saying to some degree belongs to the government inherently more than it belongs to you. And that's, functionally, it's going to be very hard for them to try and count these emails out of any, the legal term, fruit of the poisonous tree. That's not going to be the case here. The secondary point, though, I think, is that anyone who's using an email in today's age, especially if you're in a presidential transition team, would probably be best placed not to use an email for things they think might be controversial. I mean, obviously the main point was that don't break the law, but the secondary point is any email system can be broken into.
And in this case, the General Services Administration, the GSA, provided the server for the Trump transition team email. So is the claim reason, Tom, to discredit Mr. Mueller, his team, and his Russia investigation?
Well, I think, I think the importance is we have to recognize here that the Trump team lawyers, the Trump transition lawyers, have a responsibility to protect their clients first and foremost. So it makes sense for them in what is clearly now a political environment of the investigation to do battle in that regard. That helps their client. That helps put them in a position that further down the road, should something happen, they have the ability to try and shape some of the narrative. Again, what as much as I have some sympathy here for what the special counsel has done in terms of the legal practice, the reality is this whole investigation, this whole situation has very rapidly become much more political and much more heated, and I think is, on both sides, we do see it coming to a head, perhaps in a way that people might not have wished for in the best traditions of American legal practice.
Understood. Right now, I want to pop up on the screen a response from the GSA Deputy Counsel Lenny Lowenrit, who denies Corey Langhofer's claim that then GSA General Counsel Richard Beckler had promised that any request for transition team records would be, quote, routed to legal counsel for Trump for America. Beckler never made that commitment, they're saying, and so adding that the transition team members were warned that information would not be held back in any law enforcement investigation and that no expectation of privacy can be assumed. And as you said, that this investigation has gotten very political on both sides. To your point, is this setting the table for the president to order the DOJ to fire Special Counsel Mueller?
Personally, I think so, but I think that's just a sort of hunch on my part. I don't think objectively, the White House denies that's the process. I think the White House rightly has an expectation that the investigation would come to a head within a matter of months rather than years. But I do think if we go back, a lot of this stuff is sort of quite basic. So, for example, that legal, the claim that the transition has made there about a pledge from the GSA. Well, if the lawyers on either side were doing their job, there's a paper trail there somewhere. It's kind of basic legal, law school stuff. So, I mean, some of this stuff we are going to find out one way or the other. The question is, as you say, personally, yes, I do think when tax reform is done, I think the White House will fire Mueller. But, that's just my hunch.
Well, that's your hunch. We are not confirming that one way or the other, just for the record. Tom Rogan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Rafael, meanwhile, a Republican lawmaker on the House Judiciary Committee says that he is making progress in his attempt to have top officials in the FBI and Justice Department subpoenaed over those accusations of supposed bias against President Trump in the Mueller probe. Those claims denied by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein last week. But Republican Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan is telling Fox News that the chairman of the committee, Bob Goodlatte, agrees that those subpoenas should be sent out. The DOJ says, though, it is already cooperating with Congress on the matter.
First of all, we've tried to be incredibly transparent with Congress. We've made witnesses available, like a confidential informant who can speak about Uranium One. We've made Strzok, Bruce Orr, Andrew McCabe available to Congress as well. And as you know, we turned over those text messages to Congress. So I understand the frustration, but the Inspector General is looking into several of these matters, and we expect to have those reports shortly.
So are the subpoenas really needed? Peter Doocy live in our Washington bureau with more on this. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Eric. Republican lawmakers on the Hill think that they're making real progress in rooting out anti-Trump officials whose jobs are to investigate Trump. Tomorrow, Bruce Orr, a former associate attorney general, is going to talk to Senate Intelligence Committee lawmakers behind closed doors. Orr, of course, ended up on the Russia investigators' radar when lawmakers learned that he didn't disclose meetings with officials from Fusion GPS, the firm that compiled that now infamous dossier accusing Trump officials of improper actions with the Russians. In fact, House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes says that he has evidence Mr. Orr met with the dossier's author, Christopher Steele. Bruce Orr's wife, Nellie, was also on the Fusion GPS payroll and worked on Trump-related assignments there.
Yeah. All those guys need to be held accountable for what they did, but it needs to be exposed because this goes to the heart of whether this whole investigation was legitimate from the start. We still don't know. The government won't admit whether they paid Christopher Steele for the dossier, how the Russia thing started, whether they used it to surveil Trump associates. And so all this stuff needs to be brought to light.
Also this week, Andy McCabe will be on the Hill after bailing on a previously scheduled testimony at the last minute a few days ago. He is the deputy FBI director and somebody that lawmakers hope can provide context about those anti-Trump text messages sent and received by Peter Strzok. Some Republicans, like Congressman Jim Jordan, say those texts are good reason for a second special counsel. Others, though, seem happy to let the DOJ Inspector General, who found those text messages, keep looking. Eric.
All right, we'll be talking a lot more about this in the newscast. Thank you, Peter. Arthel.
All right, Eric, let's now go out to the latest on the Thomas wildfire raging in Southern California. Nearly 2-week-old fire. It's burning over 267,000 acres and destroying more than 1,000 buildings. Will Carr is in Santa Barbara, California, there with the latest. Will?
And Arthel, the conditions have calmed down dramatically here in Santa Barbara County compared to this point yesterday. But this fire is still threatening 18,000 homes. And you can see there are helicopters in the air right now. They've been circling around. We've seen other helicopters coming in, making water dumps. And as I walk up through here, I want to point out that this is the type of brush that these firefighters are having to battle when the embers are pushed down. And this brush surrounds this community. Take a look at what we were seeing yesterday when the winds were blowing 50, 60 miles per hour. We've seen a number of spot fires here in the past couple of hours. It's been a real challenge for the firefighters because the Santa Ana winds that you can hear are pushing these embers throughout the air. They're dropping spot fires all across this community. The fire crews are going and trying to put those out as quickly as possible because right when they do that, we're seeing other fires pop up, and that is the challenge for the men and the women on the ground right now. And we have a red flag warning in Southern California through tonight. We know the winds have picked up to the south of us in Ventura and in parts of Los Angeles. And Arthel, if this fire burns roughly around another 3,000 to 4,000 acres throughout the course of the day, it will then be the largest wildfire in California's history. Arthel.
Unbelievable. Will Carr, thank you. Eric?
Arthel, coming up, we'll have a lot more on the Russia investigation, from the emails to the subpoenas to the controversy. Are investigators acting appropriately, or do the accusations of bias really affect the investigation? We'll talk to former FBI Deputy Assistant Director Danny Coulson. He will join us on if prosecutors can separate the personal from the professional. Plus, North Korea not showing any signs of slowing down that nuclear program, and now reports say China is worried. So why haven't they really done anything to stop Kim Jong-un?
The president's policy on North Korea is quite clear, and there's no daylight at all between the president's policy and the pursuit of that policy.
Well, I got a Fox News alert, and it seems that we have helped the Russians. Vladimir Putin is thanking us. The White House confirming that Putin did phone President Trump. Reports say that was to thank him for the CIA foiling a terrorist plot that apparently was planned to hit the city of St. Petersburg. It seems a group of terrorists, we don't yet know who they are or what group they represent, that they plan to target a cathedral and other busy places during this Christmas season in St. Petersburg, and that the president of Russia has now thanked our CIA, believe it or not, for our help to them. We will bring you more on this as we get it, when we do get some more information. Arthel.
Hey, Eric, and meanwhile, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson addressing rising tension with North Korea. At a UN Security Council meeting on Friday, Mr. Tillerson saying diplomacy remains the preferred course of action, but the U.S. will defend itself from Pyongyang's aggression as concerns grow over the North's nuclear weapons program. The country today marking 6 years since the death of Kim Jong-il, the father of the current leader, Kim Jong-un. Brian Yennis is live in New York with more. Brian?
Good afternoon, Arthel. We know North Korea has a tendency to commemorate important anniversaries by launching rocket tests and military drills. So the world is on a little extra alert this weekend as today marks the 6th anniversary of the death of their former leader, Kim Jong-il, the father of current leader Kim Jong-un. Now, thousands marched in sub-zero temperatures this weekend and paid their respects, laying flowers and bowing there. This, as a 59-year-old Australian man was arrested Saturday for allegedly working with North Korea to sell weapons of mass destruction. Australian federal police say Chan Han Choi tried to sell North Korean missile parts and other military technology abroad. Authorities say Choi, an Australian national, was acting as a, quote, economic agent working on behalf of the North Koreans, trying to broker the sale of North Korean missile components, including software for guidance ballistic missiles, to other international entities. Now, police say the man had been in contact with high-ranking North Korean officials. The United Nations has enacted the toughest economic sanctions yet against North Korea, but for years the regime has found ways to make money selling not just weapons on the black market, but also counterfeit money and drugs. We also know North Korea's leadership has cracked down harder on their own people as economic pressure and military tensions have risen over the last year. Now, the United Nations says 13 million people are suffering from a chronic lack of food, and it's only getting worse. And there is also increased surveillance by the regime on their own people.
This is a regime that hypocritically spends billions on nuclear and ballistic missile programs while its own people suffer great poverty. The regime could feed and care for women, children, and ordinary people of North Korea if it chose the welfare of its people over weapons development.
Not just a military crisis, but a humanitarian crisis happening over there in North Korea. Tillerson reiterated North Korea will have to carry out a sustained cessation of its missile tests before the U.S. would sit down and negotiate with the regime. Arthel.
Okay, Brian Yennis, thank you.
Of course.
The president's been very clear. Militarily, we are going to be prepared should something go wrong, and our military is prepared.
Well, that's Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, of course, right after that United Nations Security Council meeting where he is warning North Korea. And at that meeting, the North Korean ambassador, Ja Sung-nam, sat right across the semicircular table, marking the first time, it's believed, that a top official of Kim Jong-un's regime sat face-to-face with our Secretary of State. So, did Nam, the North Korean ambassador, get the message? Ambassador John Bolton joins us, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, a Fox News contributor, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and chairman of the Gatestone Institute here in New York. So, Ambassador, often they read statements and it's a very pro forma type of a situation, but do you think anything that the Secretary of State said really sunk in Mr. Nam's ears?
Well, I think the fact that Secretary Tillerson is still talking about the possibility of negotiation with North Korea undermines the signal of strength that we're trying to show. You know, it may sound paradoxical, but the slim chance that North Korea will do anything to denuclearize or that China will force them to denuclearize increases to the extent they think the military threat is real. And if they think the U.S. military threat is just more rhetoric like the last several administrations, they're going to disregard it, and then North Korea will get deliverable nuclear weapons. That's the point we're at now. This is coming very soon, I think, unless we take action.
Oh, they're pointing to the military exercises that we have with South Korea. They're saying that that's offensive and that we want to invade them. That's the whole basis for their nuclear program.
Yeah, well, you know, we couldn't care less about North Korea, frankly, if it weren't for the fact they were developing nuclear weapons. And I think everybody knows that the Kim family dynasty's objective is to take control of South Korea. So having a nuclear capability would allow them to blackmail Japan, South Korea, and the United States to force American troops out of South Korea, to leave South Korea vulnerable. It would be an enormous source of revenue for this desperately poor regime in North Korea. They'll sell ballistic missile or nuclear technology to anybody, which is why they are so dangerous globally, not just in the Pacific region.
Well, what do you think the chances are of that, and how do we prevent it?
Well, I think, as the CIA Director Mike Pompeo said recently, they're within a matter of months of being able to hit targets within the United States with a thermonuclear weapon. We don't know exactly how many months, but as these things go, this is an imminent possibility. And once they get the ability to hit New York, let's say, with a nuclear weapon, our ability to take preemptive action against them is effectively over. That's what they're playing for. We've tried to rely on China. I think the president gave him a tough message during his visit to Beijing. But so far, I have to say, there's no evidence China's done a blessed thing any differently than they've done the past 25 years, which is essentially let the North continue to advance its scientific and technological ability.
Well, is China violating the very United Nations Security Council resolutions that they vote for?
I don't have any doubt of that. That's routine business for the Chinese military and for the Russians. While we're on the subject, they make money by violating the sanctions, or at least winking at those who are.
And the North Korean ambassador, Mr. Nam, he called North Korea, quote, a responsible nuclear power and peace-loving state. Here's some of what he said during that Security Council meeting.
Our possession of nuclear weapons was an individual self-defensive measures of defend our sovereignty and rights of existence and development from the U.S. nuclear threat and blackmail, and anyone is to blame for it. The U.S. is the one who must be held accountable.
You heard him say it. If anyone is to blame him for it, the U.S. must be held accountable. He accuses us of nuclear blackmail. Ambassador, finally, I mean, is there any sign of hope in the fact that he was there, that he showed up? I mean, he walked out when President Trump addressed the General Assembly in September.
Yeah, well, the North Koreans love to walk out to demonstrate their contempt for the rest of the world. They're pretty good at that. Look, that was a propaganda speech. And the fact is, we're very close to a binary choice. If China doesn't act dispositively to get rid of the North Korean regime, which I think is the only long-term solution to the nuclear problem, then we're either going to have to contemplate using military force or accept that North Korea will be the nuclear arms sales center of the world to Iran, to terrorist groups, to other third world countries that have nuclear aspirations. That's not a future I look forward to.
You think China will do that?
You know, look, there's some in China who have been writing that maybe joint Chinese-U.S. military action against the North would make sense. The answer to the North Korean nuclear threat is the North Korean regime, and the answer to the North Korean regime is to eliminate it, either by reunifying the peninsula or replacing it with a completely different government. And time is running out. That's the fact.
Ambassador John Bolton, who is with us every Sunday at this hour, thank you so much as always.
Thank you, Eric.
Of course. Arthel?
Eric, the president's lawyers taking on special counsel Robert Mueller. They're accusing Mueller's team of improperly obtaining thousands of emails from the president's transition team. Will this have an impact on Mr. Mueller's Russia investigation? We'll talk about that when we come back. Also, Congress is expected to pass the GOP tax bill this week. President Trump promising Americans could see benefits by February. So how will this affect you? We'll find out.
It's a historic moment, and we're excited to be here. This has been a terrific process with the House and Senate working together in conference, and there's a terrific bill that's going to get to the president to sign.
And welcome back. Well, after months of working on it, the House is expected to pass the GOP tax bill this Tuesday, with the Senate expected to follow suit soon thereafter. It is the biggest rewrite of the tax code we have seen since the 80s.
First of all, let me just say, this is a historic event. People said we wouldn't get this done. We're on the verge of getting this done. The single biggest change to the tax system ever that President Trump is going to sign this week.
Caroline Shively joins us from Washington, so let's talk about how lawmakers are reacting to this, Caroline.
You got it, Arthel, and that is the one thing that all lawmakers agree on. This is a historic moment. Republicans are betting on historic growth. Democrats see historic debt.
Every family in Youngstown, Ohio, or Akron, Ohio, is going to pay an additional $20,000 per family in debt that the country is going to accrue. We are borrowing money from China to do this. And I want to appeal to the Fox News audience is that, guys, we can't afford this.
But Republicans argue by slashing the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%, it will inspire companies to innovate more, hire more, and pay their workers more. Plus, the bill gives an incentive to return trillions of dollars in profits that corporations have been keeping overseas. And they dismiss claims that it will add almost $1.5 trillion to the deficit over a decade, saying that doesn't take into account how much economic growth the country will see. Yesterday, President Trump even predicted a jaw-dropping 4, 5, or 6% growth. Today, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the president meant hitting those numbers some quarters, not for the entire decade. Still, GOP leaders are making big promises.
America is never going to fall this far behind again. We're not waiting 31 years to become competitive again. We're going to continue to match the moves of our competitors. We'll continue to make the changes in our tax code so we can bring these jobs back to America, and our local businesses can compete and win anywhere in the world. And so, look, there is just a whole new attitude about making America strong for the long term.
Democrats are already planning on campaigning against Republicans next year who voted for the bill, pointing out business cuts are permanent, individual cuts expire in 2025. Arthel?
Caroline Shively, thank you. Eric.
Well, Arthel, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation is facing continued criticism, as you know, from President Trump's transition team and from some Republicans on Capitol Hill. Corey Langhofer, who happens to be the counsel for Trump for America, well, he claims that Mueller's investigators failed to directly request records from the Trump transition team in its probe, and he says they should have instead properly gotten those with the subpoena. Instead, they got the documents, it seems, right from the federal agency, the GSA, that provided services to the transition team, and did that without a warrant or subpoena. So, did they need one? Mueller's team defending its actions today, saying they properly obtained the account owner's consent or used, they say, the appropriate criminal process. Danny Coulson, former FBI Deputy Assistant Director, former FBI Hostage Rescue Team Commander, joins us now. So, Danny, was this like a sneaky end run, or direct up the middle way to obtain this stuff? Did they need these? Did they need a subpoena to get these texts, or could they just flinch them from the GSA because they're government property?
Well, absolutely. They should have gone to the White House for these documents. It's axiomatic in Washington, D.C. If you are an agency and you hold records from another agency and a third party comes in to request them, you refer them to the originating agency. That's probably not the way to go. Is it illegal? No, it's not. It just kind of violates the look bad rule here. I think the key, though, Eric, is this. The White House did not ask for redress for this through the federal court system. They didn't ask that the records be sealed or returned or put under court protection. They sent a letter to the Congress, the congressional committee, saying, let's be sure this doesn't happen in the future. So I think it's kind of a tempest in a teapot. Should they have done it? Maybe not. But is it illegal? I don't think it's illegal. Bob Mueller is not going to do something illegal. I've worked with Bob. He and I did Pan Am 103 together. He's a very good lawyer. I question whether or not we should be still looking at the things he's looking at, but he didn't know there's no illegality here. And
well, tell me, you know him personally, and you just said the way you work with him personally. Tell us a bit about him, because man, oh man, he has come under attack.
He has, and for a lot of reasons that are really not of his making. A lot of that is spillover from things happening at the FBI. Bob Mueller is a brilliant man. He is dedicated. He's a former Marine, very patriotic. He's very, very intense, and he's very good at what he does. I enjoyed working with him. He is not a whole lot of fun. He's so intense. He's not a big jokester or anything like that. But he's good at what he does. I think he'll do an admirable job here, and I have faith in him.
Well, you know what the critics say.
I'd like him to wrap this up.
You know what the critics say? He's biased. He say that he's, others say he's committed illegal acts, that, he should be fired and resigned and all this.
And here's what I would do. If I was his boss, I'd call him into the office and say, what do you have? What, according to the mission they gave you, what have you produced?
Can he say that to President? Can he say that to the Attorney General or to Rosenstein?
It would be the Deputy Attorney General. He's his boss. An independent counsel case is not the never-ending story. It is not supposed to be there forever. You have a mission, you do it, and if you have some auxiliary investigation that has nothing to do with your mission that may indicate criminality, you record that and refer it back to the Department of Justice, close shop and go away. If there's no case here, there's no case here. Now, one problem, though, and I think this is important, is that he doesn't want to close his case and find out later that, something came to light and I may have missed that. So that's a problem.
You went through that already with Hillary.
That is his problem.
Went through that exact thing. Remember that?
No, absolutely. And I've talked about that.